My name's Blake Moore. This is my Blockmesh level that I have been working on, and I'm going to go over some of the mechanics of it. So starting out super simple, the way that the Ripper is, it just has it checks for a collision with a box for the player's capsule component, and then it will call death in the third person uh, blueprint. The reason I did the capsule component is because it has a sphere collision and it was triggering it on the shoreline, and I had to make it check for that specifically. So with death, the way that I have that is it calls destroy actor. I overrid how it's destroyed, and so it'll cast to the game mode and call to respawn the player. One thing about that is on begin play, I set inside the third person game mode, I set the respawn transform to where the actor starts to begin with, so it sets that respawn point when the game starts. Um, my place mushroom is one is to show the mushroom, and it checks to see if it's toggled. It'll toggle it on and off. It'll hide it if it is showing. If it's not, it'll show it and set that it is showing, which is here just changing the visibility of the mushroom. It's always there, and its collision is turned off, so it won't collide with stuff and get you caught on things. Whenever you place a mushroom with two, it first checks to make sure that the player's not falling or jumping, so you can't place it in the air, and then it'll check to see if the mushroom is toggled. So it has to be toggled for the mushroom to be placed, and then it'll hide it and set it to not toggled, and it'll spawn a mushroom on its location. My pickups, whenever I come into contact with the sphere collisions on the pickups or the things that I try to interact with, it will try to pick it up if I call the input interact to make sure it's running the interact. It'll try to pick it up, and then it'll also call to clear that in those, which I'll show you right here. So the way that that works is the collision for like the base will add to the viewport my interact widget, which it sets the text whenever it goes and colliding it with, which it'll show just like press E to place the ember. If you don't have the ember, it'll change it to you need an ember to light it. Also, if you leave the sphere, it removes it from the parent and it clears the pickup that the player was interacting with. Um, so if you interact with the beacon itself, it casts to the third person game mode, and it'll check to see if the player has an ember. If not, changes that text and says, hey, you need to get an ember. Um, but if you do have it, it'll set the visibility of a point light. It will remove that widget. It'll call to the third person character to clear the pickup, and then it will destroy the sphere component, and then it will call beacon active, which another thing connected to that are the little towers pieces. They both have a point light in them and a visual effects smoke that will cut on whenever this event dispatcher says, hey, I am activated. So going from there to the third person blue game mode, this is where I'm storing all my information of like, do you have the ember? Do you have the stuffed animal? Uh, did you make Scylla angry? The final screen widgets in here, and also the spore count. So at the beginning, I set I bind an event to the beacon active called win, which goes to set final screen. Here's the respawn player. You get the player and the you get the class of the player and you spawn an actor there, and then you give possession of the player controller to that actor. Um, so the update spore count, the spores themselves, when you interact with them, just calls over to the game mode to incrementally go up and change that spore count. And then set the final screen. It disables the input of the player. And then it'll update the final screen, which is this function that calls for if you have the stuffed animal, if you've angered Scylla, and your spore count. And then it'll add that to the viewpoint, the viewport. Looking at my mushrooms, all that it is, you come into contact with it, it will just launch the player. So that's how the mushrooms work. The large ones work the same way, they just give you more of a launch velocity. Um, so if we're looking at the dialogue system with my fairies, uh, I have some functions that I got set up to open like conversations, and then the main things also with Scylla is if she's mad or if she's happy, it will call those over to, where is it? It is right here, the BP Scylla magic. So on begin play gets reference to Scylla, and then it'll bind events to whether she calls that she's mad or happy. If happy gets called, helps, which is it just takes the player's location, sets the location on the other side of the river. If it's mad, it casts over to it, gets the location, spawns them over the river, drops them into it. They die, respawn, and it calls over to the game mode to keep track that Scylla got angry. Um, Going ahead and looking at the final screen, I just have these simple text blocks right here. And the way that that works is I added these inputs for it. So to update the final screen, it checks to see, hey, did you get a stuffed animal? Did you anger her? Where are your spore counts? And so it'll text, or it sets the text that the beacon was lit, because that's, to get to this point, it has to be lit. Um, this will check it. I did a format text here, so I can take the integer and convert it to text and then format it. So the number here followed by the spores found at 5. It's because I only have 5 placed in there. Uh, it it helps the player see, did you get all of them, did you not? It gets that amount. Then it'll check, hey, did she get angry or not? Which is checking from here. Did Scylla get angry? If true, you angered the young fairy Scylla. If not, you did not anger the young fairy Scylla. And then it'll also check the final text of, did you collect the stuffed animal? You collected it or you did not. It does that twice depending on what you did with Scylla. Um, Come over here to the BP pickup. The way that I have that set up is all of my pickups are a child of it. They'll have the interact widget, and they have their own pickup text that they can change depending on what it is. If you pick up a spore, if you pick up an ember, it will say that what that is, and then it's the same thing as the beacon. Whenever the player crosses over into that sphere collision, it will pop up the widget. If not, it gets rid of it and clears the pickup. Um, yeah, one more thing, my dialogue system, the trees that I have for that. So I have it set to where it will, depending on what I put in, it'll make an array and fill out some buttons and the text of the buttons to change, and it'll switch. So say right here, we set here, it'll check the dialogue tree index that I have set for it. It always starts on 0, so it'll always come up here, and this will be where it starts out, and it gives you some options that will come in here. Depending on what it is, it will pass through, and then it'll branch for like this specifically. So like, do I have the stuffed animal? Uh, if I don't, then you can ask where it is. If you do, oh, this one, and you say that's it, and then it, like, so let's look at this as an example. It'll go to this dialogue where she's like, can I have her? And then you get a choice here, no, she's mine, or sure, here you go, which it'll check that. It'll check the option of the selection, and it'll switch on the integer of that option. And then whenever it switches to the pass through, it comes through here. And then so say no, and it comes up here. It'll then say, like, it'll give you some more options, which I have looped back to where, like, on second thought, here you can have her. And then if you do end up giving her it, it calls, it sets the dialogue tree index to 2, which I'll show that in a second why. And then it'll call over to uh, the NPC itself to call happy, which tells the magic to move over and then closes the conversation to give access back to the player. If not, then same concept, but calls mad and sets the index to 1. The reason for that is because base, whenever you first open up that dialogue, it'll check what that index is. And so if you do the thing that she doesn't like, it'll go to this tree here to where it's like, hey, I don't like you. And then that's it. And you can just close that. If you did things she likes, then it comes down here. I set up a select here with random integer and range, so it'll give you some little flavored text like "Yay, my little pop-up," or "Don't run away from me again, little pop-up." Basically, just give them that, and then you just leave the young fairy with her stuffed animal, and it clears the dialogue, closes the conversation. My mic just cut off for some reason. And that's pretty much the mechanics of my level, the way that things work. To showcase a few of those, so the mushrooms, whenever you place them, they launch you in the air. If you come to these, they have more of a lift to them. They launch more. Uh, and then so say over here, there's the pickup of, well here, let me talk to this NPC here. You get some choices on what you say. Uh, I had to pick out all the dialogue and all the trees for them. So it's like, what do you mean? What's going on? Give some more stuff. I have to get the beacon lit. Well, luckily they had a fire going. Here you go. Thank you. Stay safe. But then if you come back afterwards, just little little tidbits here that are just will cycle through. Give some little background, some little mystery, kind of get the player thinking like, hey, I want to explore. Um, like the pickup, as soon as I come over that collision, it will pop up the dialogue to collect the spore, and then that updates my spore count, which will show in a second. And then over here, same concept with the ember. You cross over it, you just collect it, and now it's tracked in the game mode that I have that ember and I have one sphere, so I can now interact with here. Whereas if I didn't have it and I pressed E, it would say, hey, you need an ember. Scylla down there will get angry and keep track of that, but since I didn't do that, it'll say that I didn't anger her. Do this. Beacon's lit. It pulls up that screen. It checks my game mode for all the all those criteria that I was putting into the widget. So like the beacon is lit, obviously. I did not go collect the stuffed animal, so it's not saying that I collected it. I did not anger Scylla, and I got one spore out of 5. So it it keeps track of the progress of the player. Just got different things in here, interacting with different people. So here's the different points that Scylla can spawn you at, depending on if you make her angry or make her happy. Just little things like that scattered throughout. It was a joy to make, and I can't wait to keep working on it. But thank you.